jungle canopy stretched endlessly below, a writhing sea of green shadows and ancient breath. From above, the humid air clung to the sides of the Black Hawk helicopter like a desperate ghost. Inside, President Donald J. Trump sat near the open door, his signature red tie replaced with a tan tactical scarf, boots scuffed from recent visits to muddy outposts. He had insisted, against every advisor's plea, that he be present on this particular mission. "This isn't just PR," he had told the commanding officers hours earlier at the base camp. "These troops are out there doing something big. I want to see it. I need to see it." And no one had dared to argue further. The flight had been smooth for the first 30 minutes. Below them, Vietnam's jungle seemed to shift like an oil painting in motion. Trump watched with narrowed eyes, leaning slightly forward in his seat. The pilot, a young lieutenant from Kansas, had looked back once with a mix of amusement and confusion. This wasn't normal. Former presidents didn't fly into potential conflict zones, but Trump wasn't known for normal. Suddenly the radio crackled, a burst of static interrupting the quiet hum of the rotors. "Sir, we're getting turbulence ahead. Something's not reading right on the left engine," the pilot called out. Trump barely had time to react when the aircraft jolted violently. A metallic shriek filled the cabin as the Black Hawk buckled to the side, alarms screaming in red flashes. The crew scrambled into emergency procedures. Trump gripped the side rail tightly, face pale but jaw clenched. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted. "Left turbines failing, complete power loss," the co-pilot responded. "We're going down, brace." Everything happened in seconds. The trees below expanded rapidly as gravity yanked the helicopter from the sky. Trump felt his stomach lurch as the horizon spun sideways. The whirling chaos of the blades, the crashing branches, the screech of tearing metal. It all became one monstrous roar, then impact. The world slammed into Trump with a force he couldn't describe. The seatbelt bit into his chest, and his head cracked against the side panel. For a moment there was nothing but ringing. Deafening, overwhelming silence ringing. Smoke, flames, the smell of burning oil, and something far worse. Blood, metal, fuel. Trump coughed violently, crawling over broken metal and tangled straps. The cabin was half crushed. One of the crew, maybe the pilot, hung motionless from his harness, face turned toward the shattered window. Trump didn't stop to check. Something primal kicked in. He had to move. He had to get out. Outside, the jungle waited like a beast. Branches snapped underfoot as Trump stumbled from the wreck, disoriented, one arm limp at his side. Blood trickled down his temple. He didn't know how far he walked, crawled, really, before his legs gave out. The last thing he saw before everything went black was the sun slipping behind thick canopies, casting everything in a shade of green that felt almost alive. He woke to pain, sharp, deep, biting pain. His body screamed in protest as he tried to sit up. A wave of nausea hit him hard. His vision blurred, doubled, then snapped back into clarity. He was still alive. Somehow. "Okay," he whispered, voice hoarse. "I'm still here. Of course I am." The humor didn't even convince himself. Around him, nothing but jungle. The wreckage was nowhere in sight. Had he wandered that far in his haze? He reached into his jacket. No phone, no radio, not even a flare. His breathing became shallow. The air here was thick, wet, and unforgiving. Somewhere in the distance, a bird cried out, or maybe something else. Trump wiped the blood from his forehead with a shaking hand. "Okay, Donald, you've survived worse," he muttered. "Media ambushes, legal witch hunts, Megyn Kelly." He let out a half laugh, but it died quickly in the humid air. His arm was definitely sprained. Every breath hurt. His suit, now torn and soaked, clung to him like a second skin. He started moving again, crawling more than walking. His boots dragged through the thick mud as he searched for water, help, something. Then he heard it. A sound not from the jungle, but within it. Soft footsteps, deliberate, not animal. He froze, heart thudding. Someone, or something, was watching. "Hello," he croaked. "I'm Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America. You cannot harm me." No answer, only the rustle of leaves. He turned slowly, eyes scanning the green veil of trees and vines. And then he saw her, a silhouette, human, slight, standing just beyond a tree, her face shadowed, one hand resting on a woven basket. Bare feet, long black hair tied loosely behind her neck. She didn't move. She just watched. Before he could speak again, the world spun. Trump collapsed to the earth. The last thing he saw was her stepping silently forward toward him. Then darkness. A shroud of thick, warm darkness pressed against Trump's mind as he floated somewhere between consciousness and oblivion. Sounds ebbed and flowed. A distant bird call, the drip of water, a muted voice humming a tune he couldn't place. He tried to move, but his body felt heavy, pinned to the earth by more than pain, by fear, by confusion, by the raw strangeness of his predicament. When at last he managed to open his eyes, the jungle was gone. Instead, there was a low ceiling made from woven palm leaves, patchwork light filtering through cracks. The air was humid, laced with wood smoke and the tang of crushed herbs. He was lying on something soft, a bundle of grass covered with rough cloth. For a second, panic surged. Where was he? Who had brought him here? He tried to sit up and pain bit into his shoulder. Trump groaned, a noise he didn't care if anyone heard. Immediately, the sound of movement, bare feet padding across a dirt floor. She emerged from the shadows just as he remembered, petite but steady, long hair tucked behind her ear, her eyes unreadable and ancient as the jungle itself. In her hands, a steaming clay cup. "Where?" he managed, voice cracked. She knelt beside him without a word, holding the cup to his lips. Trump recoiled, but she simply waited. When the scent of the drink, a mix of ginger, lemongrass, and something unfamiliar, reached him, desperation overruled suspicion. He sipped, feeling warmth spread through his bruised chest. "Thank you," he grunted. The woman watched, head cocked slightly, silent. She didn't speak English. He could tell from her hesitant musical hums and her deliberate gestures. Still, she had nursed his wounds, a bandage wrapped tightly around his head, a crude splint holding his wrist. He flexed his fingers. The pain was dull but bearable. For the first time since the crash, the fog of panic began to lift. Trump became aware of his surroundings. The hut was small, built of bamboo and dried grass, tucked away somewhere deep in the wild. A single candle flickered near the entrance, illuminating simple clay pots, wooden tools, a battered radio that looked like it hadn't worked since the 1970s. Through the open doorway, the jungle waited, green and infinite, alive with the calls of insects and distant rumble of thunder. Trump looked at the woman again, searching for some thread of familiarity. "I'm Donald," he said slowly, tapping his chest. "Donald." He repeated it, firmer this time, hoping the name would bridge a gap words could not. She watched him, eyes unwavering. After a moment, she pointed to herself and said, in a soft, melodic accent, "My." He nodded. "My." He tried again. "American. President, helicopter crash." He made a swooping gesture with his hand. Boom. A faint smile ghosted across her lips. She mimicked the gesture, then shook her head with a small laugh. Trump found himself smiling, too, something he hadn't expected in this nightmare. For hours, day and night, blurred together. Mai tended to him quietly, replacing bandages, feeding him rice and boiled greens, showing him how to drink water slowly so his stomach wouldn't rebel. Communication came in gestures, glances, and occasional laughter at mutual misunderstanding. Yet, as the days crawled by, uncertainty gnawed at him. Why had she saved him? Did she know who he was? Was he a hostage or simply a patient? The jungle outside held secrets, and even inside this hut, Trump felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that power and money could never fix. One night, the rain hammered against the roof, wind wailing through the cracks. Trump lay awake, listening. He caught snippets of Mai's voice as she spoke softly, praying maybe, or remembering someone lost. The melancholy in her tone wrapped itself around him. He stared into the shadows, thinking of the mission that brought him here, of the men lost in the crash, of the world outside this timeless place. He tried to picture headlines, Trump missing in Vietnam, and wondered if rescue teams scoured the jungle, if the world had moved on without him. His hand drifted to his chest, searching for his familiar phone, a lifeline that no longer existed. Instead, he found only the steady thump of his heart and the cold, real truth. Here, he was nobody, just a wounded man in a stranger's care. As dawn crept over the horizon, a thin beam of sunlight pierced the hut. Mai was already awake, grinding herbs by the fire. She glanced at him, offered a bowl of steaming broth, and smiled. A simple, silent promise that for now he was safe. Trump accepted the bowl and for the first time allowed himself to hope. The fire crackled quietly as dusk painted the sky in long golden brushstrokes. Inside the hut, the air was thick with the scent of smoked fish and burning lemongrass. Trump sat upright now, wrapped in a rough blanket, a bamboo walking stick leaning against his knee. Each day he had grown stronger, and each day Mai revealed a little more. Not through words, but through actions, habits, glances that lingered longer than before. She was unlike anyone he had ever known. No handlers, no headlines, no agenda. She moved with a grace that belonged to the jungle itself, steady, silent, sure. And yet, something about her eyes told him she had lived through storms much worse than the one still brewing outside. That evening, as lightning crawled across the sky, Mai sat down beside the fire and opened a wooden box. Inside were a handful of photographs, brittle with time. She laid them out gently on a woven mat and then looked to Trump. Her hands hovered over one of the images before pushing it forward. It was old, black and white. A child, maybe 6 or 7, barefoot and smiling, stood beside an older woman outside a small village hut. In the background, an American military truck. Trump leaned closer, heart skipping. He recognized the insignia. That truck had been part of a U.S. convoy, 1970s, perhaps earlier. "You?" he asked, pointing at the child. Mai nodded slowly. Then she pointed at another photo, a younger woman barely out of her teens, carrying what looked like a medical satchel. The jungle framed her on all sides. Another nod. A medic. She had been one of them. Not an enemy, not a soldier, but something in between. A ghost of a war that never really ended. "Why help me?" Trump finally asked, even though he didn't expect an answer. Mai looked at him for a long time. Then she reached into the box again and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn thin by time. She opened it slowly. On it, faded but still legible, was a typed U.S. military notice of civilian casualties, dozens of names. Most struck through. She pointed to one name, her finger trembling slightly. "My mother," she said in a whisper so soft it barely existed. Trump's breath caught. She wasn't supposed to speak English, but the words came like a memory forced out of hiding. "You lost her. In the war?" he asked. Mai nodded. "They called it collateral. She was cooking dinner." A silence fell between them. The fire popped once, a piece of bamboo splitting in two. Outside, the rain picked up, drumming a rhythm that sounded too much like sorrow. Trump leaned back, staring at the ceiling, his throat tightening. "What do you say to a woman who saved your life?" even though her life had been shattered by the very flag you once stood beneath? You knew who I was when you saw me, he said at last. Mai didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood and moved toward the door. For a moment, he thought she was walking away. But then she paused and looked over her shoulder. Yes, she said quietly, but Jungle doesn't care about titles. She disappeared into the downpour, leaving Trump alone with the fire, the photographs, and a feeling he hadn't known in decades: shame. The next morning, the jungle greeted him like an old adversary, humid, buzzing, alive. Mai handed him a walking stick and gestured toward the trees. We move. Where? She pointed northeast. River, 2 days. Trump hesitated, eyeing the canopy. Rescue? No signal. Jungle swallows everything, she said. He nodded, adjusting his footing. It wasn't going to be easy. They moved in silence, her footsteps light and practiced, his clumsy and careful. He slipped once, catching himself against a tree. She didn't laugh, didn't mock, only waited, then continued. They passed rusted-out shells of tanks now consumed by vines, a helmet half buried in soil, an old bullet-riddled sign with English letters barely readable, caution, demilitarized zone. This whole place is a graveyard, Trump muttered. Mai didn't respond. By sunset, they reached a clearing. She motioned for him to sit while she checked a trapline nearby. Trump watched her vanish into the green. For a moment, he was alone again. And that's when he saw it, carved faintly into a tree trunk. We were never supposed to stay. A phrase, a memory, a ghost of a soldier, long gone. Trump reached out and touched the carving, fingers lingering. So many lives had passed through this place, most forgotten, erased by time and vines. Maybe that's why Mai had stayed. Maybe that's why she had saved him. When she returned, she handed him a roasted yam. No words, just food, a silent pact. You're not alone. Not yet. Trump took a bite, chewing slowly. The taste was earthy, real, and as night fell over the jungle once more, he realized he didn't know how this would end. But for the first time, he knew it had to matter. The jungle was different at dawn. Not quiet, never that, but calmer. The chaos of insects, birds, and wind seemed to exhale in unison as the light spilled like gold dust through the trees. Trump sat on a log near their makeshift camp, staring at the steam rising from a bamboo cup of boiled water. His body ached, but his mind, it was louder than ever. Across from him, Mai adjusted the straps on her small pack, her movements methodical, precise. She had said little since they started this journey, just enough to guide, never enough to explain. Trump broke the silence. You stayed behind after the war? Mai didn't look up. Never left. You could have. There were programs, paths out. Why here? She paused, then finally looked at him. Because here is where it happened, and where it never ended. He nodded, unsure how to respond. He realized then how little he knew, not just about her, but about the country he once viewed only through military briefings and press conferences. Vietnam had always been a headline, a loss, a history lesson, but here, in the green lungs of its forgotten battlefields, it breathed differently. As they walked that morning, the terrain changed. Steeper inclines, sharper vines, more remnants of things long dead. Boots fused to tree roots, fragments of shell casings, a single U.S. dog tag half buried in red clay. They reached a ridge by midday, the sun bearing down through thick cloud cover. Mai signaled for a break. Trump sat heavily, wiping sweat from his brow with a torn piece of his shirt. The forest below stretched endlessly, but in the distance, through a veil of mist, a dark blue glimmer, the river. You said 2 days, Trump noted. Mai nodded. Tomorrow night, if no trouble. Trouble meaning. She didn't answer, just listened. Then suddenly her hand shot up, a finger to her lips. Trump froze. Somewhere nearby, footsteps, not animals, human, voices. They dropped into the underbrush just as two figures emerged from the trees, thin, lean, armed. Their uniforms were patchwork, their accents local, paramilitary, not official, not friendly. Mai pressed close beside Trump, whispering only one word, "Marauders." He stayed low, heart hammering. The two men paused near the ridge, speaking softly. One lit a cigarette, the other glanced around, scanning the tree line. For a moment, Trump was sure the man would spot them, but then a crack of thunder, just enough to distract. The men moved on. Trump exhaled. They waited a full hour before moving again. Mai led them deeper into a narrow valley, keeping close to the foliage. It was slower, harder. Trump's legs burned, his lungs rasped, but he didn't complain. Not anymore. As they settled that night beneath a rock overhang, Trump stared at the small fire Mai built with dried palm husks. The shadows danced against the stone wall, turning her face into something half-sculpted, half-spirit. "I grew up thinking I was invincible," Trump said quietly. "New York made you think like that. Then politics doubled it. I walked into every room like I owned it." Mai said nothing. He laughed bitterly. "Now here I am, eating roots, hiding from men with machetes, being kept alive by a woman who should probably hate me." Finally, she spoke. "Hate is heavy, hard to carry in the jungle." Her words settled like ash. Trump stared into the flames. "You ever leave this place, Mai? Ever want to?" She poked the fire gently. "Once, I dreamed of France, baguettes, red wine, paintings in big museums." "What stopped you?" Mai looked up, eyes steady. Someone had to remember. He didn't know what to say, so he nodded. Just nodded. That night, long after the fire had died down and the jungle resumed its whispers, Trump couldn't sleep. He lay awake listening to the rhythm of rain on leaves, replaying her words. Someone had to remember. Was that what this place was? A memory? A wound no one had bandaged? And if so, what was he? The jungle didn't answer. But the next morning, he woke up different. The morning air was damp and motionless, a heavy breath held by the jungle itself. Trump and Mai moved carefully along a narrow path carved by decades of animal instinct, not human feet. Vines dangled like veins from the canopy, and every step seemed to echo with something ancient, something watching. They hadn't spoken since sunrise. Trump's muscles ached with each careful placement of his foot. His boots, now scuffed, torn, and soaked through, squished with mud. Sweat rolled down his neck and soaked into the collar of his ripped shirt. The jungle had taken everything from him: control, comfort, image. All that remained was the man underneath. He gripped his bamboo staff tightly as they descended into a mossy ravine. Mai raised a hand suddenly. "Stop!" She crouched and pointed to the ground just ahead. A set of thin wires, barely visible, stretched beneath a patch of leaves. Tripwire. Trump blinked, unsure of what he was seeing. She motioned for him to back away slowly. Then, with a precision born of experience, she pulled a long stick from her pack and carefully prodded the leaves aside. Beneath, a rusted landmine, probably American, left behind decades ago. Trump swallowed hard. That could have been me. Mai didn't answer. She stepped over the wire like it was a fallen branch and gestured for him to follow her exact steps. He obeyed. The rest of the day blurred into a slow, agonizing crawl. The path ahead was littered with more dangers. Not just mines, but rotted bridges, loose rock, and at least one sleeping cobra. They had to silently step around. By late afternoon, the terrain flattened slightly, and the sound of water grew louder. "The river?" Trump asked. Mai nodded. "Close." But just as hope flickered, something shifted in the air. Birds went silent. The wind dropped. And from somewhere behind them, a snapping twig. Mai's eyes narrowed. She pushed Trump behind a fallen log and dropped low herself. Her hand reached for the small blade strapped to her calf. Through the trees, figures emerged. 3 of them. 2 armed with old AKs. One carried a machete and wore a patch over one eye. They weren't soldiers. Their movements were sloppy, their gear mismatched, but they were hunting something, or someone. Trump clenched his jaw. He could feel his pulse in his throat. He had been under fire before, in conflict zones as president, but this was different. This was real. No Secret Service, no Marine One, no evacuation plan. Mai motioned silently. Stay down. Wait. The men moved closer, laughing lowly, speaking in Vietnamese. Trump didn't understand the words, but he didn't need to. Their tone dripped with casual violence. One of them paused, scanning the brush. He stepped closer to their hiding spot. Trump's heart hammered. He looked at Mai. She had gone completely still, barely breathing. Suddenly a loud crack, like a branch snapping far to their left. All 3 men whipped around. One raised his rifle. Mai moved. In a fluid motion, she grabbed Trump's hand and pulled him to his feet. They ran. Branches whipped his face. Mud clung to his legs, but he didn't stop. Behind them, shouts erupted. Then gunfire. They tore through the jungle, crashing past tangled roots and overgrown trails. Trump stumbled, but Mai kept him upright. A bullet snapped past his ear, striking a tree trunk and sending bark flying. Finally, they reached a steep drop, a muddy incline sliding toward the river below. No time to think. Mai jumped. Trump followed. They slid down the slope, tumbling, rolling, crashing through foliage until they landed in a thicket of reeds near the water's edge. He coughed, spat dirt, and looked up. No one behind them yet. Mai grabbed his arm, pulling him toward a cluster of fallen trees, forming a natural hideout. They crawled inside, concealed beneath moss and mud. They waited. Minutes passed, then more. The jungle seemed to hold its breath again. Finally, nothing. The men hadn't followed. Trump collapsed backward, gasping. "Jesus!" Mai looked at him, sweat streaming down her temple. "Not yet," she said flatly. "He couldn't help it," he laughed, a low, breathless sound born of exhaustion and disbelief. And for the first time in days, Mai smiled too. Later, as dusk fell, they sat near the river's edge. Trump rinsed his face in the cool water, hands trembling slightly. He looked over at Mai. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "You would have died," she replied. He met her gaze. "Maybe that's what I deserved." She frowned. "That's not yours to decide." He stared into the current for a long time. "I came here thinking I was important, that showing up at some jungle outpost would mean something, that being me meant I mattered more." Mai didn't interrupt. "But this place doesn't care who I am. It only cares if I listen, and I haven't listened to anyone in a long time." Mai reached into her pouch and pulled out a smooth stone, flat, etched with what looked like a symbol or letter. She placed it in his hand. "It's old," she said. "From my mother, meant for protection." He turned it over in his fingers. "Thank you," he whispered. She stood. "We cross tomorrow." Trump looked up. "And after that?" Mai didn't answer. She just turned to the river, her silhouette framed by moonlight, as if already preparing to become part of the jungle again. Dawn came quietly, sliding like silk across the treetops, the first light painting the river in shades of molten bronze. Trump stood at the water's edge, stone still in hand, its surface warm from the heat of his palm. Behind him, Mai prepared a makeshift raft, logs bound tightly with rope she had woven herself over the last 2 nights. "This will take us downstream," she said. "Far enough." Trump glanced at her. "And then what?" Mai didn't answer. She focused on the knots, tightening each one like a surgeon tying off wounds. He wanted to ask if she'd come with him, wanted to believe they'd leave the jungle together. but something in her silence warned him. She had made her choice long before this journey began. By midday, they pushed the raft into the river. Trump stepped aboard, uncertain. The raft wobbled beneath him but held. Mai joined him, wordless, guiding it with a long branch. The current caught them almost instantly, and the jungle slowly began to peel away on either side. Less dense, more open. For the first time in days, the canopy broke above, revealing patches of pale blue sky. They floated in silence for hours. The water was slow but steady, winding through the veins of the forgotten war. Occasionally, Mai pointed out overgrown bunkers, twisted rebar, the skeletal remains of a rusted Huey, half sunk in the reeds. "This river saw everything," she finally said. Trump nodded, his voice low. "And forgot nothing." Then, in the distance, movement, a shimmer of metal, a dark shape on the bank. Trump stood instinctively. "What is that?" Mai grabbed his arm. "Down, now." They crouched as a patrol boat appeared, slowly crawling along the opposite shoreline. It flew, no flag. Armed men stood on deck, scanning the jungle with binoculars and rifles. Not Americans, not Vietnamese military either. Mercenaries. One of the men shouted something and pointed. Trump's blood ran cold. Had they been spotted? Mai didn't wait to find out. She shoved the raft toward the far bank and leapt into the water, pulling Trump with her. The river was cold, swift. They swam beneath the surface as long as they could before emerging under a dense curtain of reeds. They watched from the shadows as the patrol boat passed, sluggish, loud, but too far to spot them now. Trump gasped for air. "How many people are looking for me?" Mai replied softly. "You're not the only prize in this jungle." That night, they made camp on high ground, overlooking the plains that marked the end of the forest. The horizon glowed faintly with distant lights, signs of roads, maybe even a village. Civilization. "You'll be safe by morning," Mai said. Trump studied her carefully. "What about you?" "I stay. You can't go back to hiding in shadows." "It's not hiding. It's remembering." He stood. "Come with me." Mai shook her head. "The world you belong to, it forgets too quickly. I don't." He moved closer, more desperate than he expected. "You saved me, twice. I owe you everything." "You owe me nothing," she said, "but you owe them, the ones you forgot." Trump's chest tightened. She was right. This journey had taken more than blood and sweat. It had stripped him of who he thought he was, and in its place, left someone quieter, not weaker, just more aware. Mai stepped forward and placed something into his hand, the stone again. "Keep this, so you remember." He looked down at it, then back at her. "Will I see you again?" "Only if you're lost." She smiled, soft and sad. Trump opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, distant voices echoed from the forest. Dogs barking, men shouting, they had been found. Mai grabbed his arm. "Go, now!" They ran. This time she didn't guide him. He led. The trees blurred past. Trump's legs screamed, lungs burned, but he didn't stop. The jungle, once his captor, now became his shield. Branches clawed at his skin like reminders. "Don't forget, don't forget." Finally, they reached a road, a convoy, American. Trump stumbled forward, arms raised. Soldiers pointed rifles, then froze, recognizing him. "Sir," one shouted, running toward him. "It's him! It's really him!" Hands grabbed his shoulders, wrapped blankets around him. A medic checked his pulse. Flashlights danced in the night. Trump looked back, but the jungle had already swallowed Mai whole. She was gone. Later, in a clean cot under a canvas tent, he lay awake, staring at the stone in his hand. A soldier came by, asked if he needed anything. Trump only shook his head. The soldier left. Silence returned, and Trump whispered, to no one in particular, "I hope you're still watching." The lights of the forward operating base shimmered like small stars scattered in the darkness. Hushed voices echoed across the compound. Medical staff moved swiftly, and soldiers whispered to one another as the news spread. Donald J. Trump had been found, alive. Inside a reinforced tent-turned infirmary, Trump sat alone on the edge of a narrow cot. The doctors had patched his shoulder, rehydrated him, and offered him a satellite phone to call Washington. He hadn't touched it. Instead, he stared at the jungle just beyond the tent flaps, still silent, impenetrable. Somewhere out there, Mai had vanished back into the green, and with her, something deeper, the version of himself that used to believe survival meant control. A young medic entered quietly and saluted. "Mr. President, sir, they're preparing the chopper for exfil. 30 minutes. Trump didn't respond. "Sir?" He finally looked up. "What's your name?" The medic blinked. "Private Soto, sir." Trump nodded. "Private, you ever get lost before?" The young man chuckled nervously. "Not in a jungle like that, sir." Trump held his gaze. "Not talking about jungle?" Soto's smile faded. "No, sir. But I know what it feels like, to want to get out." Trump exhaled and looked down at the object still in his hand, the carved stone. Its edges were worn smooth from his grip. "I'm not sure I want to get out," he murmured. Soto hesitated, then backed out respectfully. As dawn stretched its fingers across the horizon, Trump stood at the edge of the base, wearing a clean uniform someone had laid out for him. The chopper rumbled in the distance, preparing to take him home. But he didn't move. Instead, he walked past the flight deck, past the watchtowers, through the outer gate, until he stood alone on the dirt road, staring back toward the trees. The jungle, green and ancient, stared back in silence. He raised the stone to his lips and whispered, "Thank you." Then, as if on instinct, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a scrap of paper, the corner of a ration box he had tucked away. He borrowed a pen from a nearby guard and began to write. "To the one who stayed, you gave me more than water, more than healing. You gave me the chance to remember who I am, not what the world painted me to be. I don't know if this letter will reach you. I don't even know if you're still watching. But I will carry your name in silence until the day silence itself remembers it. Dua." He folded it, tucked it into a plastic bag with the stone, and handed it to the base commander. "Drop this back where you found me, no questions." The commander looked confused, but nodded. "Understood, sir." Trump turned, walking slowly toward the waiting helicopter. Each step felt heavier than the next. 12 weeks later, at a modest village near the edge of the jungle, an old woman, Mai's aunt, walked to the river to check her fishing traps. What she found instead was a small package, sealed against the water, resting against a stone. Inside, a letter, a photograph of the stone returned, and a folded American flag bearing an embroidered name, Mai. She read the letter once, then again, then held it to her chest as the wind picked up and the trees whispered things that had no translation. Back in Washington, Trump sat alone in a quiet room of his estate, surrounded by aides and press reports and schedules, none of which interested him anymore. On his desk sat a new frame, nestled between photographs of children and campaign rallies. It held a single object, the jungle stone. Beneath it, engraved in brass, "To the one who stayed." He looked out the window toward a cherry blossom tree swaying in the yard, young but growing strong. He wasn't the same man who went into the jungle, and he hoped the world wouldn't be either. The press conference was scheduled for 8 a.m., flanked by flags beneath the soft hum of lights and the murmurs of reporters. Donald Trump stood at the podium, not in a suit, but in a plain jacket, no tie. His expression was unreadable. The room fell silent as he opened a weathered notebook, pages marked by jungle rain and human hands. "This isn't a speech," he began. "It's a memory." Flashes went off. Cameras clicked, but he didn't pause. I went into that jungle thinking I was a symbol, a president, a man who could survive anything, but I was wrong. A hush swept the room. I was lost, not just in the trees, in the idea of who I thought I was, and someone found me, someone who owed me nothing, someone whose name the world never learned, someone the war tried to erase, but couldn't. He turned the page. Her name was Mai. Gasps, scribbles, confusion, curiosity. She wasn't a soldier, she was a survivor, a healer, and the jungle still listened to her, even after decades of silence. She saved my life, and more than that, she saved the part of me that I forgot existed. He closed the notebook. You want a headline? That's your headline. Then, stepping back from the podium, he left the room in silence. That night, a special segment aired on every major news outlet. Not about politics, not about power, but about a journey, a woman. A war that never truly ended. Clips from Vietnam showed the place where he had been rescued. A tree with a carved message. We were never supposed to stay. A drone shot passed over the river where a package had been found. A final shot. A cherry blossom tree planted at the edge of the estate. A small plaque beneath it that read, "In honor of the one who stayed." Hate is heavy, hard to carry in the jungle. Weeks passed, then months. Trump never returned to the campaign trail. He refused interviews about the incident. Instead, he spent most mornings walking beneath that cherry tree, often alone, often silent. He had begun writing, longhand, on yellow legal pads, not about policies or legacy, but about what happened when a man with everything was left with nothing, and had to be rebuilt by someone who had lost far more. A memoir, maybe, a tribute, definitely. The working title was written in bold on the first page, Echoes of War. And somewhere, in a distant corner of the world, a woman stepped barefoot into the early light of dawn. The jungle around her was quiet, respectful. She reached into a pocket and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. On it, a rough, almost childlike sketch of a cherry tree. Underneath it, a single sentence. You gave me a second chance. I promise I'll carry it forward. She smiled, tucked it into her satchel, and walked on, disappearing into the green once more.